Have you ever seen a snake, whether it's behind a window or in front of the window or maybe in person, and jumped back because it was a snake? A lot of people are skittish about snakes. That's what our program is about today on This Life. Welcome.
Today we're talking about snakes and people being skittish about snakes. And
including us, me at least, are you?
You know, I don't know how I feel about them. I think I like them when they're behind the glass, and I don't mind touching them if someone owns it. You know what I'm saying? I just don't
If
have
it's
a
a
problem.
pet, if it's a pet.
If it's a pet, I have not, thank God, ever bumped into a snake just as I'm walking around. You know, I've just never done that.
Bumped into a
No,
snake.
no. You know, even when walking around the hills up here, there are signs that say that there are rattlers and so on and so forth. I don't go. I don't really want to bump into the snake, you know. But but I haven't seen it recently, but in the past I've seen, you know, you're just driving along and seen somebody with a snake draped around their necks.
Oh, no, you don't.
As if it's just casual, you know. And a lot of people have. I had a friend who had a boa constrictor as a pet. That was his pet, and he fed it rabbits.
Oh, no.
And little
Dilys,
rabbits.
stop right there.
Okay, that's just what I saw.
That's awful.
That's what they had.
Sorry, but that really gives me the willies.
I'm sorry. What, did you see any snakes last week?
Well, no, but I was remembering this last week when we were thinking about this program. I was remembering going walking in Minnesota out in the woods, and I stepped over this log, and there were all this big tangle of
Now, see,
little
you're creeping
snakes
me out.
about this long. And they were just, I don't know what they were doing,
Stop
but
doing
there was
that.
just a lot of them there.
I
And I
feel
thought, that is really odd.
I feel quite sure that we're going to get write-ins after this program. People who are having nightmares about snakes. I've had many encounters with snakes.
Really?
Yes, and 3 encounters with rattlesnakes in which I was within 1 foot.
Wow.
One encounter in which I was just inches away. I was weeding my garden, and I had a glove on, and I had reached forward. I was kneeling on the ground, and it was only at that point that I saw a little, and you know, little rattlers are worse.
They're just, they're dangerous.
because they can't control themselves. There he was, coiled, and I wouldn't even have seen him coiled except that then he began hissing at me, and my glove was within inches, and I was just frozen.
Oh my.
So yeah, I'm skittish about snakes.
Snakes. Okay, I think I was fine till Barbara started doing.
I know.
this.
I know.
Well, you know, I'm not really afraid of snakes. I'm not afraid of them, but I don't really, it's not something, I mean, who walks around thinking about snakes? I guess I just don't really,
I
except
do.
I work with people who tell me about nightmares that they have of snakes and
Really?
things like that. Uh-huh.
Well, I have a friend who blogged once about a dream he had about snakes. And I checked with him. I knew that he had received a lot of responses to it. I checked with him. This is a colleague of mine, the School of Religion. I checked with him just a couple of days ago, and he says he is still getting thousands
Wow.
of responses. Not a few, thousands.
Wow.
And I said, is it literally that? He said, oh, yes. He said, people writing just to see what he thinks, people writing about their dreams about snakes.
Amazing.
People, there was something about his entry, his blog entry about snakes that has prompted a lot of response.
Amazing.
My.
Well, let's talk about a little case here, a little
Okay.
vignette that we have. Sarah is a single mother of Beth, who is 12. Beth is very frightened of snakes and sometimes awakens from sleep during the night with nightmares about snakes, here we go, slowly slithering up the foot of her bed. Sarah's ex-husband had a small garden snake in an aquarium before he left the family, but no one seems to know where it went, and Sarah suspects that he let it loose in the house just to be contrary. Sarah does not care for snakes at all, and she doesn't know how to help her daughter get over her snake fears.
Sell the house.
I don't know what attracts a snake. You know, I don't know. I guess you'd have to just be really cautious putting your hand in a dark closet or things like that. But I'd sure bring an exterminator in right away.
Yes, we would have to look. I would not sleep till we went through every inch of that house to find that garden snake. But if it's a garden snake, do they like to be outside though? Would it be safe to hope that the snake has actually
Well, maybe
left
it
the
can't
house?
get out. How does it get out if you've got a sealed up house?
This is a really strange conversation. Where does a snake go if it's in the house?
Well, I think snakes like dark, damp
Well, they
kinds
do.
of places,
They
don't
do.
they?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think they do.
And it's not at all unusual for them to be coiled up in some dark place where it's cool. But I mean, here we have a young girl, 12 years old, who is just scared.
Well, I think her mother needs to do what's prudent, which all of us would do if we had a child that was petrified of something. We'd do what is prudent to bring in the, I was going to say the Orkin man, but I'm not sure that that's who
I
it
was
is.
about to
Bring
say
in the
exterminator.
exterminator and have them do a thorough search of the house. And I don't know if there are snake traps or whatever it is. Some people who know about snakes are going to be laughing at my comments, I know. But to do everything that's prudent to get rid of the snake in the house. But I'm thinking that this child still is really petrified. And if you have a mom that's petrified of snakes, trying to comfort a child that's petrified of snakes, it could go two directions. Either they both get worse and phobic of snakes, which get a phobia,
And we'll talk about that. Yeah.
or they underplay the fact that there's a snake loose in the house that could bite them. Or
I think the unexpected is what's scary. I remember I live in the country, and I remember when a lizard got in my house, and it was fairly long, one of those alligator lizards, and I just couldn't sleep for the longest time because there was no way to know whether it was in or out. And it was that unexpected that any moment I was going to step on that lizard inside my house, and it was hard to cope.
Now, what's interesting, in growing up in the Caribbean, snakes, not snakes, because we didn't have snakes, but lizards. The only lizards we ever chased out of our house were croaking lizards, simply because they were noisy.
now that gives me the creeps.
You know, and they were bigger.
That's-
But lizards, where you walked outside, they were slithering, you know, they were all over the ground and so on and so forth. Snakes, though, because of the mongoose that they brought to the island, they'd eradicated pretty much all the snakes in Jamaica, so we never really worried about snakes. But those lizards were everywhere.
Well, and you know where I find snakes on my property are in the tree.
in the trees.
Yes, because I have fruit trees, and we cover them so that the birds won't get in this fruit, and the snakes get tangled in that
Wow.
net. And so you go to get the fruit, and there's a snake in the tree.
See, I didn't
mean,
even know snakes went up trees like
they go
here.
up trees.
Well, I'm just thinking of how many times I've picked your persimmons and never saw a snake.
I know. Oh, no,
Maybe I should have been
they
worried.
wouldn't
I don't
get
know.
in those trees because there's no net. So it was-
Now, what if Beth's mom Sarah, exposed her to snakes from a distance, safely from a distance? Wouldn't that help? Like,
well, now you're kind of onto the question of how to treat people who have fears, or especially phobias.
Snake phobias.
Snake phobias, and that certainly isn't that one of the ways to treat a phobia is to have experienced flooding, and that is a lot of encounters with snakes.
Or to have graduated, you know, maybe just thinking about it. I think just thinking about a snake sometimes is enough to make anybody go clammy.
Oh,
And
right.
other times that doesn't bother them, but seeing one would be. So I think kind of slowly
Over time.
thinking about what is the more intense and the more intense kinds of exposure to it.
But I think what Beth is experiencing is normal. This young girl is having nightmares over a snake that she knows is lost in the house, and to have a nightmare over that is a normal thing. I know when I stepped over a snake that it was in my garage, and not knowing it was there, for 6 months after, I always stepped over that spot, even though I knew the snake wasn't there. So I think what she's experiencing, first of all, is not a phobia, it's just normal. But now we're moving on to the question of what is a phobia, right? I wanted to read some symptoms of phobias. Fast breathing, moving to hyperventilation, palpitations, muscle tension and pain, sweating, feeling faint, numbness, and pins and needles, experience of pins and needles, dizziness, churning of your stomach, diarrhea. Those are all terror.
Inability to move, can't breathe. Yeah.
Yeah. So those are some of the symptoms of phobia.
So I guess I'm wondering if we're talking about trying to get over the phobia, or if we're talking about how to think of snakes in a more friendly manner. Because when we're talking about this, what came to my mind was one time one of my classes, they said, can we bring Mr. Ugly to class? And I thought, what a terrible thing to say about a client. And I said, well, does Mr. Ugly want to come to class? And they said, oh no, Dr. Hernandez, Mr. Ugly is a rosy tarantula.
Oh.
And that we want to do some graduated exposure, and I think all of the class can hold this thing eventually. I wanted to say, do you mind if I watch from the ledge? But honestly, I'm not really afraid of spiders, but over the course of that class with that graduated exposure, a bunch of the students were able to hold that tarantula on their hand and comment about what it felt like, and then put it in there, and then they kind of, but they were able to do that, and so it was able to get over
right
it.
Now. Just
Deep breath. Deep breath.
So what are you suggesting, Barbara, that a graduated exposure to things might actually prevent a phobia?
Well, it's
from
a treatment
developing?
for phobia.
Certainly
yeah.
it's a treatment.
But I think it would be a good, healthy way to, if you have a parent who could say, oh, let's go to the aquarium.
Yes.
Let's go look and make it a fascinating experience.
Yes.
Wow, wonder how they move. They must have lots of muscles to be able to slither.
When we go to our children go to the pet store, we have a fish tank, and we'll actually go through and look at the tarantulas and the scorpions and the snakes, and they'll look at it and see how so they don't have a fear of it, because they've never come upon one in the wild, thank God. And it's just a pet. It's something that's behind the wall. And so they haven't, there's not this idea of fear. And they're not watching anything that tells them, the snake's going to jump out of the water at you and those kinds of things. So that's been helpful so far, just to kind of, before they even get to the stage of developing the fear that becomes uncontrollable, just saying that these are things that were made, God made, and they're a part of life. These, when you see something looking like this, like especially living here, scorpions and black widow spiders, they need to know what those are and say, if you see one of those, you come and get help, or you call your mom.
Maybe to turn their fear into fascination.
Right. I think you're correct in saying that people that don't have exposure. I remember some students who came to my house, and it was getting dark, and when it gets dark, you can't see a lot of things, and they said, "Oh, isn't it scary to be out here?" I said, "What would you be afraid of?" Because I think it feels safe, because I'm more afraid of people than I am the little critters that come around. But I was interested that they were afraid of being out in the country, because that's not what they were used to being.
Amazing.
Well, we do have some email questions, and the first one says, I'm planning to go on an eco-vacation where we'll be hiking through rainforests. It is unlikely that I might see any snakes, but the closer I get to the date of my trip, I'm freaking out. It's too late to get a refund. What can I do?
There are so many good books on, I was going to say, I don't know what you call it, not snake husbandry, but, about raising snakes and understanding snakes and recognizing snakes. I think information is our friend, really, to be able to understand as much as possible about which snakes are poisonous and where are their habitat and how to avoid them, or, what to carry in case you're bitten, God forbid, or, what is the proper behavior around a snake.
So you're saying to read about the area in which you're going. And also to know that most snakes are not aggressive. There are a couple, and we have one in Tennessee that it is, and we know what they look like, and you stay away from those. But most snakes aren't aggressive. So you're saying to know your area. Okay, another one. My boyfriend Omar has acquired, this sounds like the one you were talking about, has acquired a boa constrictor as a pet. I have told him repeatedly that I don't like snakes, yet he insists that if I just got to know the pet, I wouldn't dislike them anymore. When he visits, he brings the snake over because I won't go see him anymore. I'm not sure how much more of this I can take. Omar's about to go bye-bye. How do I tell him? Oh, it's true. How do I tell him it's me or the snake? Well, that's easy, honey. It's me or the snake.
Well, I'm kind of surprised that he's not very sensitive about her fears and concerns. If he's really that concerned, and if she's really that worried about it, the fact that he's not taking any any real interest in the fact that she's frightened would be more concerning to me than the fact that she's being exposed to a boa constrictor.
Maybe he thinks just by it's because she hasn't been exposed, so he's going to try to help her along.
Well, let's say he's absolutely correct. If she would just get to know Mr. Bob or whatever this whatever the snake's name is,
Yeah.
if she just got to know him, she would like him. But doesn't she have the option and the prerogative to say, "I don't want to like him. I
And
don't
wanna know
want to
him.
get to know him."
Mhm.
Right.
But
Yes,
she
she
does
does.
have the right
She
to
does.
that.
She
Well, you've heard
Absolutely.
men say it's you or your cats.
I've never
I've
heard that.
Well, it's not been directed at me, but I've heard people say that. You
Oh,
know, men,
sure.
they have allergies or they have, a dislike that a cat will just come and get on you
Right.
without being invited. And so
Yes.
those things seem to be worked out. But I mean, it seems pretty excessive for him to be taking the snake to her
Well,
house.
but you're bringing up something, Barbara, that's I think very important. We should take pets seriously. It's not a small matter for some people, the whole pet issue. And so if there are some people that if they said it's either, it's me and the cats or it's not me, the person will say it's not you then because I can't take cats. So one thing I would say to her, he may be very serious about this pet and that she needs to think about that.
Right.
And he needs to think about the fact that her no may mean no.
I hope she sticks to her guns. Number 3, I have dreams, nightmares at night about snakes. Does this have a meaning?
I don't know that dreaming about snakes have a meaning. I mean, coming from the Caribbean, I can't think of any one snake story. I've heard of other things, but not a snake. But I think in some cultures, dreaming about snakes may have meanings.
Well, I think that, really depending on, therapeutically, there are always people who will suggest that snakes represent various things. But, even in this case that we talked about with this little girl having nightmares, I'm wondering if this having nightmares about the snake slithering up into her bed might just be symbolic of some other fear that she had. I mean, look what happened with her father doing something so spiteful. And so I don't think having a dream about a snake necessarily means it is about a snake or that it doesn't.
I agree that I wouldn't say that just because there's snakes in your dream that has a meaning, but I would say that every dream has a meaning.
Sure.
Every dream is your subconscious trying to put pieces of memory together, and it comes out as strange things. It might mean that she's fearful of the snake. It might mean that she's fearful of the dark. Or it might mean that she's fearful of something else and it's coming in the form of a snake in her dream. It has a meaning. I think we can agree that it has a meaning, but not a particular meaning related to a snake.
One time, a rattlesnake got in my garage, and I had to kill it myself. Now, every time I go into my garage, I think about that snake. I can't seem to get it out of my mind. Is this normal?
Well, I sure hope so, because that wouldn't be more representative of my experience if I had written it myself. That is exactly what happened to me. I couldn't get it out of my mind, and it seemed normal. It was a scary moment. It continued for a while, and now it's gone. So I would say absolutely that's normal.
Now, if you're afraid to go into the garage, that's
Right.
another issue.
That's-
If you're afraid to walk out there or you start having nightmares about being in the garage, that would be something else entirely.
Well, I was afraid for a while because I thought the snake had brothers and sisters.
Maybe they had a whole nest out
A
there.
whole nest out there.
Well, that makes sense.
But I hear what you're saying.
But there's a difference between going out there and being cautious and mindful,
Right.
or just ignoring the garage
Completely.
altogether.
Completely, yes.
Yeah.
So that now
Yes.
belongs to the snakes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Snake domain.
Oh boy, listen to this one. I have heard that people's pet pythons have escaped and are now living in the Everglades in the wild. I've even seen
Oh,
PBS
yeah.
programs on
Yes.
this. They are huge and could present a real threat to anyone visiting. I have dreams about this all the time. What can I do?
Well, wow.
Stay out of the Everglades.
Go somewhere else on vacation. But there are two parts to this, it seems to me. One is that there's a problem in the Everglades, and the second is that this person, is it male or female? It doesn't say.
Doesn't
Is
say.
dreaming about them. To me, those are two different issues. There is a problem in the Everglades. There's a big problem. But that's different than the fact that she's having nightmares. Did she say nightmares? No, dreams.
Dreams.
She's saying, though, he or she is saying, I have dreams about this all the time. That would concern me because it doesn't say that this person lives in the
Everglades,
Everglades.
right.
So we have a person here that hears about something happening somewhere else, and now they're dreaming about it all the time.
Yeah, it sounds like she's perseverating, or he's perseverating about it, can't get it out of their mind, and it must drive that person kind of nuts.
Right.
Like to think about something else for a while.
And I know that on this program, we don't like to always be saying, you know, go to therapy, but I think this is, more than some of the other situations, a situation in which someone ought to talk to someone about what's going on.
Definitely, because there's such good treatment for some of these things where you feel like phobias, lots of phobias, can be cured. You can have a full recovery from that, so you're not frightened of things anymore. And certainly, if this is interfering with this person's sleep,
Yes.
and they can't manage, at work and so forth, that's concerning.
I don't want my children to grow up as fearful of snakes as I am. How can I help them avoid this without me having to be around snakes with them?
So the parent needs help, and then they not hoping that they can't pass it on to their children. Do you think their children have already picked up on it?
I was going to say, it's hard to teach your children something that you can't face yourself. Don't you think?
It is. I think the parent needs to change right along with the kids. I think a lot of times we try to tell our kids to do things we can't even begin to do. And this is just one example of that, to start getting over it. And start finding that fascination with the snakes rather than, snakes are all through the Bible. Doesn't help that the imagery for a snake in the Bible is evil, is Satan, is, something slithery and awful, dangerous. But, we even here at Loma Linda have the snake doctor, who's absolutely fascinated with snakes and has made it his career to help people recover from snake bites. There's a lot that can be introduced to children to help them get excited about some of these things, as long as they don't collect them and bring them to the house.
Oh, my. A friend of mine, her daughter believes that all creatures are God's creatures, even if they're bad, in the sense of they dig holes in the ground.
Sure, gophers.
They have a right to live too, Mommy, is what she's always saying. Mommy, the gopher has a right to live. But the interesting thing is they found, and now her mom is just as bad, because she's like, I think, a Dr. Doolittle. Because if there's a stray animal somewhere or they find one, they'll take it in. So a couple summers ago, they found a garden snake, and they made a little tank and, had the snake there, and she was telling everybody who came to the house about the snake and talking about the snake, and she would do research about the snake and so on and so forth. I don't think her mom was fond of the snake, but she knows that, her child really is fascinated by, just animals, period, and their rights to live. And I think it's important for us to learn about them. I think snakes are pretty animals. They're very, very pretty.
Yeah.
When they change their, what's that called again? That's not molting for snakes.
Oh, the skin
When
comes
they
off.
shed
They
their
shed their skin, they don't really annoy anybody, it seems. They tend to just kind of lay around a lot. And
Well, they have
keep out of
fascinating
trouble.
physiology, how they have springs in their jaws that can really open wide to take in whatever they're going to eat, if it's larger,
Right.
than their mouth. Their tongue alone is, the way it darts in and out, just the way they can move with all the muscles. I've wondered, where are the ears on a snake? How far around can the eyes see? I think there's a lot of things like that if parents, were to stop and let's look on the internet and let's learn about some of these things. It could be kind of exciting.
Well, and I think we're talking about snakes right now, but aren't we talking about sort of any phobia?
Yes.
Any and there are all kinds of phobias that aren't around creatures that we'll leave that, but mostly we're talking about creature phobia.
Yeah.
And I'm really concerned about this question specifically because we have a parent who wants something for their child that they're not willing to confront. And I think that's a big issue, and I would strongly suggest for a parent that parent needs to bite that bullet and deal with it themselves so that they can be there for their kids, for their children.
Well, I'm thinking back to when I was a child. My father was, he's gone now, but he used to be petrified of spiders. And he was a great big man, and if we were driving to school, a little teeny tiny
Oh,
spider would
yes.
fly in the window and land on his
Yes.
chest. The car would careen to the side of the road. He'd leap out and start beating on himself, trying to get rid of this spider, and we would just erupt into gales of laughter. None of us were afraid of spiders. So I think that
Oh, okay.
sometimes if you just say, you know what, I wish I wasn't this way, but I'm nervous around these things, and I'd like you
But
to
I don't
enjoy
want you to
these.
be. Yes. Yes.
I think there's a way to go about that. Actually,
Yeah.
those are some of the funniest memories of my dad, is jumping out of the car on the way to school and fighting
Beating
off a little
himself.
tiny spider that
Oh, my
fell out of a
goodness.
tree, you know.
Yeah.
I've had conversations with our children. Don't like my son specifically doesn't want to fly in the car. I mean, he will melt down.
A fly in
a
the
fly
car.
in the car,
Fly?
just a fly. And so whenever a fly comes in, we'll say, shoo fly, don't bother me, and we'll sing the song over and over and over again. And typically he's gotten a little bit older, but I mean, full blown meltdown. He is weeping. We've had to pull the
Aw.
car over, and our daughter has picked up on it as well. One night we were driving in Maryland, and she kept screaming. Well, what was happening was we were driving, and she would wake up, and the reflection of the leaves on the trees as we were driving by came in the car. So she kept thinking something was on her. I mean, we pulled over on the side of the street, showing her, honey, there are no bugs in the car. And I'm not afraid of bugs. I mean, flies, please, no. No, that tarantula thing, you have a good story. So it's been interesting. I was like, where did you pick up on this from? Because it wasn't something that we've even said to you or encouraged, but they have this thing about the flies and coming
Yes.
into the car,
Well, I
so.
think it's important to have a child tell what their fears are, so that they can at least be entertained and validated, or somehow, given other ways to think about these
I'm very
fears.
interested that you're in working with your father. It was a funny thing, not a scary thing, that you internalized.
Well, it's pretty funny to see a grown man jump out of a car at 90 miles. It's just, he probably put us at danger, but on these country roads, and he'd go, good grief, and he'd slap himself and leap out of the vehicle and start, going like this in his hair. And, well, that's pretty funny. And we didn't care. I mean, they're little tiny things. They didn't hurt anybody.
But I think what you're not saying, what you wouldn't disagree with, is that phobias are real. For that
they're very
person.
real.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And to be taken quite seriously.
I'm really overwhelmed by it.
Yeah.
And it becomes paralyzing, as you said, and
Because
it can lead
it
to
does
health
becomes
threats.
paralyzed. See, I saw a horrible shot on YouTube about a young man who had a phobia, and someone didn't take him seriously, and it had terrible consequences. So I think we have to treat it very seriously. If people say they're afraid, and they show symptoms of being afraid, they are afraid, and that should be respected, even
You
if
can't
it
really,
looks funny.
yeah, and you can't just talk them out of it or say, keep a stiff upper lip, or
And you can't
have
say,
nothing to
those
be
are
afraid
small
of.
little bugs, don't worry about it.
Right.
Well, today
No.
we've been talking about skittish of snakes, and about phobias, and about fears. And we want you to know that people's fears are real, and we should listen when we hear people talk about it and get some help. Thank you for watching This Life.